Welcome to the Dibley Diaries for this week. This week we're thinking about John the Baptist. It's the second Sunday of Advent, and one of the things I love about John is that we know that he wore weird clothes because it says that, and John also says that he's not worthy to untie Jesus' sandals. And so it's a little bit of thinking about clothing this week. Now, many years ago people would really dress up to come to a Sunday church service. That's where the phrase Sunday best comes from. But I wonder what it's like for your church congregation. I knew someone who used to spend their Sunday mornings during the sermon counting and categorising how many different hats were being worn by the people around them in the congregation. But those times have kind of passed. It's very rare to wear a hat to a church service these days, unless perhaps it's a wedding, when maybe that tradition still stands a little bit. But there are two kind of arguments about whether or not you should wear something special when coming to a church service. So one would say actually what we do when we come together in corporate worship in a church worship service is important. So yes, so mark that by wearing something special and important. And the counter argument is that actually what we do when we're together in a church service is just an extension of our ordinary lives, and theologically that's also a very valid statement. So it's part of our ordinariness, so actually wearing our ordinary clothes is important and reminds us of how it just happens in our ordinariness. Two arguments about it, but I think what's really important is that congregations shouldn't judge people on what they're wearing to church. I don't know if that still happens very much. I've not had it reported to me recently, although certainly in the past, about actually what is that person wearing to church. The most important thing is that person is there joining in. Thought for the week this week is all about John the Baptist, and we're based on Mark 1:1-8, where John the Baptist is talked about. He's talked about as the one proclaiming the way for the Messiah, the one who is saying that Jesus is coming. And John the Baptist and I have always been friends. He was a person of interest in my primary school. I went to a St John the Baptist Church of England primary school, and then almost all the places where I've worked when I've been a vicar, there's been a St John the Baptist dedicated church building. So John and I go back a long way, and in this passage I love that it talks about John's clothing. It's kind of how we know that Jesus wore ordinary clothing because John wore extraordinary clothing, and otherwise if Jesus wore strange clothing they would have commented on it as well, but John wore this strange clothing, and he also ate strange food, so that's commented on about how he's setting himself apart from others by those things. But John in this passage in Mark is saying that he is preparing the way for the one who's to come, for the Messiah. And he talks in particular about being not worthy to untie the thong of the sandals of the one who is coming. And I've really been thinking about this week in the whole context of John and Jesus. So if we go back a bit to John and Jesus were cousins, related in a way, and when Mary is pregnant with Jesus, she goes to see Elizabeth, and when Elizabeth sees Mary, John the Baptist jumps in her womb in a way which is not just, oh, that annoying baby is kicking my ribs again, but is something considered special because Elizabeth says, oh, he jumped for joy. So that's interaction where they are coming together, and John is recognising Jesus as the Messiah whilst John is still in the womb. But we don't know lots of things about what happens between when John is born and when Jesus is born. We don't know if they knew each other really well. We don't know if they played with each other or had time spent with each other. We just don't know that, and we don't know how much Elizabeth told John about what had happened, and we don't know exactly what Mary told Jesus about what had happened. So we get to this point where both men are adults and they have this interaction, and John is preparing the way for Jesus, and he talks about the fact that Jesus is the special one and John is not the special one, which is strange because of course John was the celebrity precious baby because all the things that had happened to Zechariah, the message from God, him being struck dumb, Elizabeth having this special baby, and the arguments about John's name, that made him a very celebrity baby, where Jesus in many ways was a bit more of a notorious baby than a special baby in the community in that way, because of course Joseph took Mary with him and then they were away and all those sorts of things, and some people might even suggest that the problem that Jesus had was that he had two dads and had to spend his life working out what that meant for him. But I want to go back to the sandals because I think that's a really interesting thing for us to think about. So John said that he was not worthy to untie the thong of the sandals of the person who was coming after him, of the Messiah. But when we think about taking shoes off, it's a very personal thing. If we need help with our shoes, that's actually really personal care that we think about for that. But of course, Jesus does do that for other people. When John was saying that he knew that Jesus was the Messiah, that he was the one who was coming, and he wasn't worthy to untie Jesus' shoes. But then when we fast forward to Easter, Jesus untied people's shoes. John obviously then wasn't thinking that's what the Messiah was about, but Jesus showed us what being the Messiah was about by untying people's shoes and washing their feet just before Easter. He was doing to others what John said he was not even worthy to do to the Messiah. So as we struggle through Advent and we think about what does this all mean, the incarnation, what does that all mean for us? We are struggling with this idea that whilst John thought he wasn't worthy to untie the sandals of the Messiah, yet the Messiah was going to be the person who would be such a servant that he would untie the thongs of other people's sandals and wash their feet. The Dibley moment for this week took place in a rural churchyard where a very important church leader, clergy person, was there to do a sort of particular task. So we'd had the service, part of which had been in the churchyard. We went back to the vestry, and this senior person, this city person, made such a fuss about how dirty their shoes were. They didn't really seem all that dirty to us. We were just like, well, you've been standing in the churchyard. Of course it's going to be an issue, but they would not go out to see everybody else until their shoes had been properly cleaned. So this is my Dibley moment, a warning for you. If you have a city person coming to your rural churchyard, make sure that they are A, wearing sturdy shoes, and B, aren't going to make a fuss about getting their shoes clean, or that you have something on standby which they can clean their shoes with after they've been outside. That's it for the Dibley Diaries for this week. I pray that you and your village, however large or small, have a really blessed week in your preparations for Christmas.